When I watch squirrels, it seems like they can always find their way back to a nut that they've left behind. This, and the original YouTube squirrel memory test, got me thinking, how do they do that? One theory is that they use local landmarks to navigate their way. Another is that they have an innate geospatial sense that allows them to return to a spot just by remembering its geospatial location. I teamed up with a squirrel named Squirrel, who lives across the street from me, to test these theories. First, I set up some cups like in the original YouTube squirrel memory test. I put 4 cups facing upward in a row and filled the one on the right with hazelnuts. This first time, Squirrel comes in from the upper right, and the nuts are in the cup closest to him, so he doesn't even bother to explore the other cups. He just goes right to the one with the nuts. During the 7 minutes that it takes him to scurry across the street, stow his nut, and come back, I turn all the cups face down, but leave the nuts under the same one. Again he enters from the upper right and has no trouble finding the nuts, which are under the nearest cup. During the 4 minutes that he is across the street stowing his nut, I stand the cup up again, leaving the nuts under it. This time he enters the screen from the upper left. Perhaps out of curiosity, he gives a quick smell to a couple of the closer cups, but he quickly finds his way to the cup on the right with the nuts. He's across the street for about 8 minutes, but when he comes back, he knows right where he's going. After about 4 minutes, he's back for another hazelnut. And again, he doesn't even bother smelling under the cups with no nuts under them. After about 12 minutes, I think he was dodging the neighbor's cat, he comes back for another nut, and again, there's no dilly-dallying about. He knows right where he's going. After another 5 minutes, he comes back and smells briefly under the third cup from the left before going on to the one with the nuts. This could just be idle curiosity, or it might be a hint of something else. Maybe he's not really going by landmarks, but instead an innate geospatial sense puts him in the right general area, and then he uses his short-range sense of smell. But now comes the real test. While he's across the street for 6 minutes, I take all the nuts away and reposition the cups. Now the cup on the far left is in the same spot as the cup that used to have the nuts. So if he's going by an innate geospatial memory, he should think the nuts are now under the cup on the far left. But if he's going by local landmarks, he should think that the nuts are under the cup on the far right, because up to now the nuts have always been in the cup on the far right. The cup that's on the far right now is not in the same spot as the far right cup before, but it is in the same position relative to the other cups in the row. And none of them have moved very far, so if he doesn't have a good innate geospatial sense, then he shouldn't notice that the row of cups has moved over a bit. Let's see what Squirrel does. Before we watch that again, let's try to figure out what we just saw. First, the one cup that he doesn't pay any attention to is the one on the far right. So much for the local landmarks theory. Second, his surprise seems greatest when he finds that there are no nuts under the cup on the left. He smells under it 3 times, and he seems very puzzled when he doesn't find any nuts under it. Since that cup was in the same spot as the cup with the nuts before, His behavior is consistent with having an innate geospatial sense. However, he first goes to the third cup from the left and smells under it. This could just be idle curiosity, but I doubt it. Or, if he had sensed a new geospatial location for some of the cups, he might have thought it worthwhile to smell under a couple of them. But that wouldn't explain why he completely ignores the cup on the right and is especially puzzled when the cup on the left has no hazelnuts. His behavior here really confused me until I remembered that in order to make sure that he wouldn't just go for the cup itself, I intentionally rearranged the relative positions of the cups when I moved them. I put the cup that used to have the nuts under it in the third position from the left. I can't tell the cups apart, and I didn't think Squirrel could either, but I wasn't sure, and from his behavior, it looks like maybe he can. It doesn't look like he decides to go to that cup first because he smells something about it, like a trace of hazelnuts or his own scent, so maybe he was able to recognize the cup by sight. That would make sense and would explain why his first thought was to go to the familiar cup, and also why he wasn't all that surprised when it didn't have nuts under it, since the familiar cup had certainly changed both in its absolute position and in its relative position in the row. It doesn't explain why he smelled briefly under the second cup, but if he sensed that the cups had been moved, maybe he thought that it couldn't hurt to smell under it on his way to the spot that had had the nuts every time before. Now that we have some idea of what's going on, let's watch Squirrel do that again. Squirrel's behavior seems to rule out the local landmark theory, since he completely ignores the cup on the right. His behavior seems consistent with having an innate geospatial memory, especially his surprise at not finding any nuts under the cup in the spot that had had the nuts every time before. But he went first to the cup that used to have nuts under it, even though it was in a different spot. This calls for some further research. Did he recognize that cup? And if so, how? And why did he go there first? For some bonus footage that shows another interesting aspect of squirrel behavior, I put the cups back in their original positions, leaving the one with the nuts where it was and moving the others. I figured Squirrel should go immediately to the cup on the right with the nuts. He does, and he smells under it for a moment, but then what's he doing? Oh, there was another squirrel off to the left of the screen watching him. So he was faking his friend out. He didn't want to reveal where his hazelnuts were, even though he knew where they were, both by location and by smell. As soon as his friend is far enough away, and with a little encouragement from the cameraman, Squirrel returns to the cups. He does a quick fake and checks that his friend off the screen to the left really isn't watching anymore. And then he goes right to the hazelnuts. In this bonus footage, Squirrel has given us a little demonstration of how squirrels can be deliberately deceptive when they think they're being watched.